Have you ever wondered why Paul constantly circles back to Abraham in his writings? Because Abraham is the shared root of the whole story. If you don't understand Abraham, you won't understand what happened at Sinai. If you don't understand the promise given to Abraham, you'll misunderstand the purpose of the law. In Galatians 3:16, Paul says that the promise was not made to seeds as of many, but to seed as of one. And that seed is Messiah. Because if the promise is made to the seed and the seed is Messiah, then the inheritance promised to Abraham was always anchored in him. Paul then says the law, which came 430 years later, cannot annul the covenant confirmed before by God. The promise came first. And that is so important for us to know in understanding the gospel. The promise came first. The covenant oath confirmed it. Sinai came later. And Paul says if the inheritance is of the law, it is no longer of promise. And then Paul is careful here to say that the law is not against the promise. And he answers his own question by saying, well, then what purpose does the law serve then? He says the law was added because of transgressions until the seed should come to whom the promise was made. That word until is very important. And in Galatians 4 verse 4, we read that when the fullness of the time was come, Yahuwah sent his son to redeem them that were under the law. The law, the Torah, is not against the promises, but the law is not how you receive the promises. The law itself was never the source of inheritance. It pointed forward, it guarded, it instructed, it revealed sin, but it was always moving history toward the embodiment of that promise. And that embodiment is our Messiah, Yahusha, Yeshua, Jesus, because that is the seed to who the promises were made. Now, this also does not mean that we go from law to no law. Paul lived in that tension, and that was something he constantly defended in his epistles. Because when people hear the law was fulfilled in Christ, we hear that all the time. They often assume that means abolished, or that the law is just not relevant to a believer's walk anymore. But that is not Paul's argument. Paul even says, is the law against the promises of God? Certainly not. If fulfilled meant abolished, then Paul would never spend so much time defending the continuity of the promise. Paul wouldn't spend so much time pointing people back to Abraham, which came before Sinai. And although Abraham had faith, it is written in Genesis 26 verse 5 that Abraham obeyed Yah's voice and kept his commandments, statutes, and laws. So just so we're clear, there were already commandments in existence before Levi was born and before laws were given through Moses. And honestly, that should really cause us to pause and consider what that means. But Paul even tells us that there were laws added because of transgression. Something was added, and this adding came 430 years after the covenant was confirmed. There's a timeline that we've got to follow here. Paul even uses, in the same epistle, uses the allegory of two covenants in Galatians 4 to help get his point across. One covenant is associated with Hagar and Sinai. The other is associated with Sarah and the Jerusalem from above. Hagar is the bondwoman, Sarah is the free woman. And Paul says we are children of the free woman, because those are the children of the promise. And Paul says we are children of promise, as Isaac was. So what we don't have is an issue about law versus promise. The issue is misunderstanding covenant and misunderstanding covenant order, because our Messiah didn't come to bring something new. He came to restore and fulfill the heavenly order that's always existed. The gospel truly starts in Genesis. It starts with Abraham, because again, Abraham is the shared root of the entire story. Our Messiah told Nicodemus in John chapter 3 that you must be born from above. It doesn't say you must be born again. The Greek text says you must be born from above. Messiah is showing us how to walk in Torah under a priestly administration in the order of Melchizedek, not the order of Aaron, not the laws imposed under the Levitical priesthood, which Hebrews 9 verse 10 says were imposed until the time of Reformation. And now, because of Messiah, it's our responsibility to walk in the Melchizedek order, to understand what it means to live in the promise, to live under the priesthood, and to align our lives with the seed who secures the covenant. This is restoration, and understanding the Melchizedek order is everything.